What the heck is this? Have you heard of Havana Syndrome? Basically, these government officials have had these weird, mysterious symptoms, which I'm about to read to you, and they don't know what caused it. And there is a heavily redacted FBI paper about it. And I think it has to do with interdimensional experiments. So basically, this first thing came upon us in 2016. I believe it started in Havana, Cuba, hence the name. And specifically, government officials and their families reported these symptoms in about a dozen different locations. Some were sudden, some last months or longer. They're trying to even get workers' comp for these symptoms because they can't work anymore. A lot of ear ringing, tinnitus, visual disturbances, nausea, vertigo and dizziness, insomnia, depression, impaired balance. These sound a lot like a spiritual awakening, but worse. Some people thought it was a weapon from another place from another country. They're still trying to figure that out now, I guess, because this article is a few days old. Maybe they were exposed to toxic chemicals. So here's the FBI report. And as it goes on, it gets more redacted. It wouldn't take a llama to realize they're doing something more secret if they have to redact this much. And what is it, you ask? Now, I'm completely theorizing here, but if they were to experiment with portals and try to reach interdimensional beings through plasma, the fourth state of matter, which I think is the only substance where we could create some type of wormhole or interdimensional communication to make this possible, and if the government knows about it, maybe, just maybe at these centers, this is how people are getting these symptoms. That would explain the electromagnetic symptoms. Or scalar wave symptoms.
There is a mystery weapon that is attacking Americans that we know almost nothing about. Now, I know I sound like some crazy conspiracy theorist, but Havana Syndrome is as real as it gets. It's called Havana Syndrome because in 2016, officials at the US Embassy in Cuba started experiencing some very unusual symptoms. They would hear this crazy sound that was like grating metal or like the windows rolled down in a fast-moving car, like whoom, 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 whoom. And then suddenly, they were hit with nausea, hearing loss, and memory loss that lasted for days or even months. At the time, many people dismissed it and said it was just mass hysteria or psychosomatic. The noise was crickets. But then they did brain scans and found that these diplomats had 5% less white matter volume in their brains, like a concussion without a concussion. The CIA has studied it, the University of Pennsylvania, even the CDC, and we have no idea what's causing this. But it's happened to over 200 Americans and a couple dozen Canadians, and we have no idea what it is or who's doing it.
What's the Havana Syndrome? Geek out with me. The Havana Syndrome is a condition where career diplomats, intelligence officers, and others serving in U.S. missions abroad experienced strange and painful acoustic sensations. The condition got its name in 2016 after a group of diplomats and covert operatives in Havana all came down with similar symptoms. They'd hear some kind of noise or feel some kind of pressure, and then they would suffer from dizziness, nausea, and debilitating headaches that could last for years. Now, it's called the Havana Syndrome, but it didn't just happen there. In fact, around 1,000 cases of these incidents, which the U.S. government calls anomalous health incidents, have been reported from U.S. missions around the world. And the U.S. government...
I think the weirdest part of this is, like, if we are to believe that the dad discussed earlier in the lore section, like, placed his ear to his daughter's head and heard the sound, like, that's really freaky to me, because it suggests that, like, there's literally, like, what, a chip in her head? Like, what? Why is the sound coming from inside their head? Imagine if you heard a sound. I mean, it's like a catch-22. Like, if you hear a sound and no one else hears it, it's like, ugh, I wish someone believed me. But then it's like, if you hear a sound and someone placed their ear to your head and heard it as well, like muffled, then it's like, ugh, there's something definitely going on in there that is, like, physical, that is making itself known in the physical plane. That's crazy. I don't know.
So by now, I'm sure you guys have heard a little bit about the Havana Syndrome. And if you haven't, I absolutely suggest that you look it up because it's very interesting, to say the least. So far, there have been around 130 cases, primarily CIA operatives, diplomats, and military personnel. Victims have reported symptoms such as disorientation, nausea, vertigo, memory loss, temporary and permanent hearing loss, and brain damage similar to that of a concussion. Now, this has been happening since 2016 when we first opened up our embassy in Cuba, and that's why we call it the Havana Syndrome. But since that time, this has been happening in locations all over the world. And this even includes Washington, D.C. Now, obviously, we don't understand what's going on very well, but the biggest suspects are microwave or RF energy The only real question when it comes to this theory, though, that it is a sound-based weapon, is how does it actually have the effects that it's having? A lot of it does make sense. A lot of it's to do with the inner ear, the nausea, the vertigo. But when it comes to physical things like a concussion, that's completely unheard of. Which brings me to my theory. So I'm just going to say I do believe it's a weapon, and I do believe it's sound-based. But I believe what we should be looking at is going to be something similar to stereotactic radiosurgery. And it pretty much just means we're going to shoot a bunch of beams from different directions, and they're all going to converge on one point. And at that one point is where the focus is and where the damage is done. It's actually something used for tumors. But here's my point. Why can't you do the same thing with sound waves? You could shoot them from different directions, different angles, have them intersect at a certain point, and I'm sure, the frequency or the harmonics or whatever, as they're meeting and converging, are going to be able to do some damage. Anyway, this is something I find interesting, and if you do too, interact in some way, leave a comment or something. Let me know what your theories are. But thank you very much for listening.
It makes them feel like they're in pain, makes them feel like they want to vomit, put voices in their head.
Wow.
Whatever you want to do, you can program the frequency into their body to make it do that.
Is this what the people said they were experiencing in the
Cuba?
Yeah,
Like
the
Havana
base in
Havana Syndrome? Is
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going. All right.
So
you're on it.
So then here's the key about the God thing. Him, not wanting to be one of these gods. When he released them from that, he started talking to the people peacefully, and they started groveling at his feet. And he said, no, get up. He said, I'm a son of Atlantis. He didn't say I'm
Havana Syndrome. You ever heard about it?
Yeah, Havana Syndrome is a weapon that was used against diplomats who were visiting Cuba, and evidently they had it in an adjacent building, or may even have it in an adjacent room of the room where the diplomats were, and it actually causes permanent brain injury. It stirs up your brain and causes a concussion.
Yes, exactly. And that's what was so crazy to read about, because of course when it was first coming out, nobody really knew what the lasting damage was going to be, if anything. But we knew there was fatigue, there was nausea, there was pressure in the head. But then once people started getting monitored and scanned a little bit more, you saw that there was like volume loss in the head, similar to persistent concussion.
And then, of course, you had the Cubans, the communists in Cuba, saying, we don't know what you're talking about. We never used a weapon like that. We don't even know how weapons like that work.
I'm inclined to believe them.
It smells like a false flag.
Havana Syndrome is a real thing. What does that mean? It's effectively a microwave weapon that's been used to blast the brains of Americans working out of embassies, first in Havana, Colombia, Delhi, Washington, D.C., lots of places, severely hurting Americans serving abroad. And the CIA director says it's all in their minds. That's wrong. When your people are getting screwed by a...
So you think that's... I don't have a view on that. I mean, I don't know the answer, but you think based on evidence that this is absolutely real?
Yes, I know it to be real.
Havana Syndrome. Because whatever it was, what they were really terrified of was that someone was going to be able to just with people's heads from a distance. So you could point it at the president while he's giving a speech. You could point it at a race car driver in the middle of a turn. You could do whatever you want. And if that really came to be, where you can just with someone's head, they said the panel focused on cases in which victims heard a strange sound or felt pressure and then experienced a loss of balance and ear pain. In addition, the panel focused on cases in which the victims reported the sounds as coming from a specific location. Whoa.
So spooky.
Whoa.
Fuck spooky, man.
That's wild shit, dude. They can just with your brain to
turn you off.
Now, if they can do that, why can't they do that with an electric bolt that kills you? I bet they can.
They could.
I bet they will be able to.
That's the scary thing. Whatever way you could think of to kill people, they will eventually invent it.
Well, think of before the gun. It was pretty hard to kill someone. Now you can kill someone a half a mile away with a rifle.
I love a good conspiracy theory as much as the next person. But it's no fun when people don't know the conspiracy that is part of your particular fixation. So, of course, I had to write an entire series about mine. I'm talking about Havana Syndrome. Hi, I'm Lisa Alvarez. I am an audio producer and podcaster, and I just unveiled the true title of my upcoming spy thriller series, Havana Syndrome. I actually asked all my voice actors whether or not they knew what Havana Syndrome was, and only about half of them did. It's interesting that so many people that I know in my sphere don't really know what this is, and the fact that there's been multiple hearings on the Hill, a 60-minute special, and a National Health Institute investigation means that, I don't know, it pings me in a very particular way that's deeper than just a quirky little mystery. You see, I'm not just an audio storyteller, I'm also second-generation Cuban American. And this story, a story about a mysterious sound that has been linked to physical ailments and possibly a sound weapon in Cuba, and this is real, at least as real as these reports can be. Just after we opened our embassy, well, this whole idea has pinged my inspiration. I decided to write a story about Havana Syndrome, not just to play around with this sound-based conspiracy, but to explore my own feelings about my identity, my politics, and intergenerational trauma and healing. In my research, I noticed a weird line of thinking that I haven't really seen or heard anybody else really go down. Like, did you know the Cuban Americans that were involved in the Bay of Pigs were also involved in Watergate? And yellow journalism, as we know it, was formed in response to U.S. interests in Cuba after the USS Maine. Thank you, AP US History. We're also coming up to the anniversaries of not just the reopening of the U.S. Embassy in Havana, but also the 25th anniversary of the incident with Elian Gonzalez, the 5-year-old Cuban boy who sparked an international custody incident. There are so many feelings about the United States and Cuba, and it's not all political. It's personal too. Like many Cuban Americans, I have family stories that are deeply tied, and there's some things that I feel like it's a live wire having to navigate it when talking to my parents and my grandparents and my cousins and my aunts and uncles about it. In fact, I was the first person in over 70 years to go back to Cuba. I have a headache just thinking about it, and well, maybe Havana Syndrome is simply a symptom of a much larger disease. Havana Syndrome, the podcast, will be premiering this Thanksgiving. But if you want to follow along and learn a little bit more about U.S.-Cuba history and, me dusting off my multiple international affairs, politics degrees, I have it documented in a prequel documentary series that I'm calling Once Upon a Time in Havana, which is currently streaming anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm one of those people who believes that we should not be keeping these stories in silence. And this is a very important story for me. I've been working on it for 3 years, and I hope you join me.
Yeah. Thousands of people. And they were silent. And then all of a sudden you see one person like turn around, and then all of a sudden you hear like and then people start running away. They were using a sonic weapon to disperse the crowd.
And the government's denying it, but look at the video I just sent you. There's no way you can even orchestrate this. They pointed it down the center of the street, literally like the Red Sea, they just split.
Because we talked about the frequency weapons?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like what it is.
And the government,
happening to them?
It's the Cuban, remember the Havana Syndrome? We're talking about this basically secret weapon that Russia's been developing using frequencies to basically cause something in your brain to like freak out.
and they say this thing gets up to 160 decibels, which is like standing right next to a rock launch.
Oh my
and so
gosh.
you don't know what you're hearing. You can't run from it. The government people are saying they didn't do it. If it wasn't the government, figure out what it was.
Yeah,
Give us an
wasn't.
answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was scary.
We definitely have that weapon in
yeah.
America.
Oh, yeah.
We've never seen it be used though, right?
Not that
what's-
we're aware of.
Wouldn't it be crazy if they had it playing constant on like a low level, so that we're always like.
A mysterious illness befalling U.S. agents stationed abroad. This is part 95 of the Unexplained Mystery Iceberg. In 2016, staff at the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba started complaining of strange symptoms seemingly out of nowhere. The incidents always began with the victim hearing a strange noise and feeling mild cranial pressure. Afterwards, they would report symptoms such as headache, nausea, and memory loss, with MRIs showing apparent brain damage. Since then, over 1,000 cases have been reported by government personnel stationed in various foreign locations. Some suspected an unknown weapon utilizing something like infrasound or microwave radiation. Others suspected some form of poison or environmental toxins. Or the strangest explanation, which is some disruptive-ass crickets. The media jumped to immediately blame Russia or China, which is a very reliable way to get the general public foaming at the mouth. But the government claims to have ruled out foreign involvement in all but a handful of cases. The large majority were considered to be some sort of psychosomatic mass hysteria type of thing. But that doesn't account for the few dozen more legitimate cases, which were mostly from that first batch in Cuba and then a few scattered around Eastern Europe. Real or not, it's not like the government's just going to announce, some other country has a brain damage noise weapon that we don't understand. Sleep well.
Have you ever heard of Havana Syndrome? Pretty much we keep sending, or used to send diplomats to Cuba, specifically Havana, because that's, I think, their capital, or Havana, whatever you want to call it. And they would always get like headaches. They would report headaches, and then they'd get like sick. They'd get nauseous. And then they would, like, after they'd leave, they'd be fine. But all our diplomats kept going there and getting sick and reporting the same symptoms. And the running theory is that they had some sort of like sonic weapon where they would play like either sounds that are too low to be able to hear or too high to be able to hear, but still affect your brain, I guess.